Good morning once again. Good to see you. You can take the message outline from your bulletin. I want to talk about reaching spiritual success through personal discipline. Every great achiever has one common denominator, and that's discipline. Whether it's the physical Olympics that happens every 4 years, or whether it is the spiritual Olympics of Christian living, discipline is the key to success. The Apostle Paul was a very disciplined person, and several times he illustrated the Christian life by using the metaphor of an athlete. This is what he said in 1 Corinthians 9:24. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. That would be discipline. They do it to win a perishable wreath. We do it to win an imperishable one. Now, there isn't a lot of talk about discipline because people are generally more interested in what is easy and convenient. For example, in the physical realm, rather than exercising, we are all looking for the one pill that we can take that will cause us to lose weight while allowing us to eat anything we want. In the spiritual realm, we want the benefits of Christian living, but not necessarily the commitment and hard work. The Bible says that spiritual success and discipline go hand in hand. So there's two parts to the message. In the first part, we're going to take a look at some areas where we need to exercise discipline. And then in the second part, we're going to talk about some steps that we can take to personally discipline ourselves to spiritual success. So principle number one, if we're going to be a spiritual success, I have to control my emotions. We have to learn to control our emotions. Now, this is what it says in Proverbs 25:28. A person without self-control, the person who has no discipline, is as defenseless as a city with broken down walls. Now, my question is, why? Well, if we don't have discipline, then we are at the mercy of our emotions, and emotions are not always a dependable guide. Emotions say, I will do it if I feel like it, and I won't do it if I don't feel like it. Well, my question is, what if God says to do something and you don't feel like it? Are we going to follow our emotions or what God says? So we have to learn to control our emotions. Number two, if we're going to be a spiritual success, I have to learn to control my words. I thought about that. I guess I would put maybe control my speech. Maybe speech would be more formal. Control my words, control my speech. This is Proverbs 13:3. The book gives a lot of good advice on living. He who guards his lips guards his life, but he who speaks rashly will come to ruin. And then in Proverbs 21:23, this is the Living Bible paraphrase, and I think there's a little bit of humor in this. Keep your mouth closed and you'll stay out of trouble. Yeah, that's one of those proverbs we know. That thing's going to be pretty much universally true. So I heard, you know what? It's simple to understand. The challenge is doing it. I heard about a pilot who was selling rides in his single-engine airplane. And there was room for himself and 2 passengers. And a woman got into an argument with the pilot and said, if I pay for myself, my husband ought to be able to fly free. It was like a 20-minute ride around up above the city. And the pilot was wanting to make a little bit of extra money. So he said, I'll tell you what, I'll let the both of you go for the price of one on this condition. Neither one of you says anything the entire ride. Not a word. I said, fine. So he takes him up in his small airplane, and he does everything that he can to scare him. He dives it. He twists it. He rolls it. That's even possible with a single-engine airplane. Not a word said. So he lands the plane, and he says to the wife, you have more self-control and more discipline than any person I have ever met. I did everything that I could to scare you, things that I have never done before in an airplane, but you didn't say anything. And the wife said, it was really, really tough to be quiet. And the only time I was tempted to say anything is when we were upside down and my husband fell out. But I didn't say anything because I wanted the 2-for-1 deal. So sometimes it can be a challenge in controlling our words. And then 3 is I have to learn to control my temper. My temper. This is Proverbs 19:11. If you are sensible, that would be everyone in this room, you will control your temper. When someone wrongs you, it is a great virtue to ignore it. So are you the kind of person who always flies off the handle and I'm gonna get even? It's a matter of discipline. George Washington Carver, the famous agricultural guy a couple of generations ago up at Tuskegee, said this, I will never allow another man to control my life by making me hate him. That's a good point. Because when you say, I hate so-and-so, in a sense they are controlling you and controlling your emotions. In Proverbs 16:32, it says this, it is better to win control over yourself than whole cities. That's true. From a spiritual, eternal perspective, it is better to have control over yourself than to be so powerful as to control multiple cities, because it was Jesus who said, what good will it be for you if you gain the whole world but forfeit your soul in the process? It won't be anything. So control my temper. And then number 4, if I'm going to be a spiritual success, I have to control my money. And by my money, I mean, maybe I should say control my spending. You know what money represents. The little bit we see of it, right? Everybody's financial situation is different. Some people have quite a bit of money, other people not so much so. But there is the principle of biblical saving money. In Proverbs 21:20, it says, the wise man saves for the future, but the foolish man spends whatever he gets. So, the average American saves approximately 3% annually. We are toward the bottom of the list, not at the bottom, but toward the bottom. Canadians save about 5%. Spain and Germany, 9%. Australia, 11%. And France is toward the top at 15%. One of the reasons why we are toward the bottom is because we like to live in the now. It's like the person said, I am going to live within my means, even if it means charging it. If you think about that one, it'll be funny in about 20 seconds, that'll be funny. Probably would. The average American credit card debt, that's carried over to the next month, according to nerdwallet.com, is $15,900. The overall household debt, which would include mortgage and loans, is $135,000. So we have to learn to control our finances within whatever financial structure we have. There was this girl, and she was talking to her boyfriend. And she said, you know my mom, she just loves to shop. In fact, she's not happy unless she is shopping. And she went shopping every single day for months until finally the other day her credit cards were stolen. And the boyfriend said, well, did your dad report it?
No.
And the dad said, no, I didn't report it. He didn't report it. He said the thieves are actually charging less than my mom. So we have to learn to control our money. And then number 5, I have to control my physical appetites. This is a part of the spiritual success and pleasing God program that we're a part of. This is 1 Thessalonians 4, and it says, God's will for you is to stay away from sexual sin. Each of you should learn to control his body in a way that is holy and honorable. So are you treating your body in a way that is holy and honorable? That is a part of discipline and spiritual success. So those are a few areas where we need to exercise discipline. Now in the second part, there are some steps that we can take to discipline ourselves, to help ourselves be God's man or God's woman. So number 1 is admit my lack of discipline. And if there's some kind of a habit or addiction that you're trying to break away from, the first step is going to admit my lack of discipline. You have to quit rationalizing and making excuses. I don't have a drinking problem. I don't have a temper. I'm in physically good shape. I'm a great Christian. Even Paul, who was a tremendously disciplined person, had personal struggles. The guy was not without his flaws. In Romans 7, and he was describing himself before Christ came into his life. But we understand what he's saying here. We get it. We get the struggle. He says this, I do not understand what I do, for I don't do what I would like to, but instead I do what I hate. For even though the desire to do good is in me, I am not able to do it. Do you, at least on some level, identify with that? The problem with discipline is that sometimes we go about it in the wrong way. One thing that isn't going to work for you in the long run is willpower alone. Now, willpower is good if it's a part of a package. But let me tell you my experience with willpower. Willpower works only as long as you feel good about what you're doing. You feel good about dieting. Woo! Well, willpower is good. But as soon as you get depressed or discouraged, you go back to your old nature and your old ways. So in addition to willpower, we need the second point. Believe God will help me. This is a powerful point for us as believers. Beyond willpower, we have divine power available to us. So this is Philippians 2 and verse 13. And it says, God is working in you, giving you the desire and the power to do what pleases Him. So would you circle desire and power to do? God says, I will give you the desire to do what is right and the power to do it. But what it takes on our part is discipline and submission to the Lord. There is a condition attached to it. If you will submit to the Lord, then He will give you the desire, He will give you the power, the inner strength, whatever you want to call it, to do what is right, in addition to the willpower. And then third thing we can do is follow the principle of positive reinforcement. Follow the principle of positive reinforcement, and I'm going to give you another phrase for that just after I read the verse. This is Philippians 4, verse 8. And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. So he's coming to the end of the book, and he says, I want to close with this thought. Usually what you close with is what your audience remembers. Whatever I usually conclude with is what you remember through the week. He said, fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right. Think about things that are pure, lovely, and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Then the God of peace will be with you. Now what he says is this. Eliminate what you don't want by focusing on what you do want. We could call it the principle of replacement. Because you and I move toward whatever it is that we are focusing on. If you are focusing on a plate of hot chocolate chip cookies, well, there'd be no way to overcome that. Maybe I should find another example. That'd be a tough one, right? That'd be a tough one to overcome. But we know how it is in our moral lives and our thinking. If you want to eliminate something, you replace it with something else. So if we will focus on these good things, then it's going to help us to minimize. I used the word eliminate. Maybe eliminate was a little strong. It will help us to minimize these other things that we don't want. And you've heard the old expression, you can't keep the birds from flying over your head, but you can keep them from building a nest there. Number 4 is prepare now for spiritual battles. Because we are in a spiritual battle. Just beyond this physical realm that we see, there's a spiritual realm that we wrestle against every day, according to Ephesians 6:12. This is Proverbs 13:16. It says, a wise man thinks ahead, a fool doesn't and even brags about it. Ephesians 6:13. Now, I like it in the Good News translation, and I chose it because it uses the word now. So put on God's armor now. I like that. Now. Then, when the evil day comes, you will be able to resist the enemy's attacks. So, following this metaphor, do you put the spiritual armor on after the battle begins? Whoa, I'm in the middle of a battle. I better get my armor on. Do you put your armor on after the temptation starts? No. You put the armor on now in advance and in anticipation of what's going to happen in the future. So the heart of discipline is this. Decide in advance what you want to do. Do you want to be baptized? Develop your prayer life? Study the Bible? If you allow your feelings to control everything you do, you're going to end up going in the wrong direction because feelings alone are never a totally dependable guide. That's why it says twice in the book of Proverbs, there is a way that seems right to a person, but the end of that way is the way of death. So prepare now for spiritual battles. And then 5, enlist the support of those you trust. There's a few people in your life you trust. You can enlist their support. There's this famous passage in Ecclesiastes. It's one of the better known passages in the book. In chapter 4 and verse 9 it says, 2 are better than 1, because if one falls down, the other can help him up. 2 can resist an attack that would defeat one man alone. So the Bible tells us over and over, more than 50 times in the New Testament, the phrase one another is used. But we're told over and over, admonish one another, pray for one another, rebuke one another, love one another, encourage one another. That's one of the values of small groups. This is one of the values of having some people who are close to you. You can say, I have a need. Will you pray for me? And sometimes if it's nothing more than a psychological lift, it's helpful. And then 6, is view everything in the context of your eternal reward. I know this is difficult to do on a daily basis when you're in the middle of something, but view everything in the context of your eternal reward. Moses is a great example of someone making tough decisions and showing discipline by choosing in advance to focus on his eternal reward rather than on the immediate pleasures that were available to him. So look at this in Hebrews 11, verse 24. By faith, Moses, he was the guy floating in the basket and got picked up and raised in the king's house, although his mother was in there too. By faith, Moses refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter and chose, so he's making some choices here, to share the oppression of God's people instead of enjoying the fleeting pleasures of sin, for he was looking ahead to his great reward. So here's Moses, and he is living in the king's palace with wealth and pleasure and power, and he rejected those things that we spend most of our lives trying to get, to live with a bunch of slaves who were at the worst stage in their history. I don't get it. Well, I get it because we're about to read why. But if I were just to read this story about Moses making that choice, I might say the guy's a little bit beside himself. Why would you leave all of that for that? Well, here's the answer. It's the part that's underlined. He was looking ahead to his great reward. He saw that the long-term reward was going to be greater than the short-term pleasure. So what does this mean in application to us as Christians? Living the Christian life is not easy. Never has been easy. There's financial problems. There's relationship problems. There's health problems. But in the middle of it all, you understand that this is not the final chapter, nor is this your final reward. So what are some of the potential benefits of personal discipline? Financially, you can get out of debt. That'd be good. Morally, have a clear conscience. Physically, feel good, have more energy. Spiritually, experience the peace of God that passes all understanding, and it's a beautiful peace because it's not based on circumstances. It's based on the knowledge of your relationship to the Lord. Emotionally, have confidence in your relationship with God. So, where do you need to develop more self-control or discipline? Is it in Bible reading? Is it in prayer? Is it attending church, participating in church, controlling your temper, controlling your speech, maintaining your health, involvement in ministry? I want to conclude with Romans 8, verse 6. It says to be controlled by human nature results in death. Spiritual death in this context.
Skip that.
To be controlled by the Spirit results in life and peace. And so what Paul is saying is that spirit control begins by letting God take control. And that is your choice. And it is the secret to spiritual success. Now, you don't know this, so I'm going to share this with you. I knew they were going to have the video on the Mexico mission trip, and that's why I shortened my lesson, just for that. I just want to let you know I was aware of it, okay? And you don't even know where I shortened it, and I'm not going to tell you. It's good to have David back, and he's going to lead us in an invitation hymn. If there's something you need to do, it's on your mind, it's on your conscience, to make your life right with the Lord, whether it's asking us to intercede on your behalf in prayer, putting Jesus Christ on in baptism. If we can help you in some way, let us know while we stand and sing.